Smile.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, so here we are. We are Saturday afternoon. This is the 42nd day of March 2020, bringing you another series of interesting conversations with people who actually know what they're talking about. As I said, when I started all this was a matter of trying to figure out when I was a lieutenant in the Army by talking to platoon sergeants, first sergeants, and the lieutenants and the lieutenant mafia that had gone before me. How do you do this Army stuff? And then when I was in the startup world, I went around to all the entrepreneurs that actually had been there, done that, one beer at a time, asked them how to do it. Now that we're in the world of COVID, I don't know how this works. I don't think anybody really knows how it works, but there are people that are experts in their lanes that I got on the phone with back in January and February and started talking to them and realized that their ideas were so fantastic that I had to share them. So I decided to create these live chats, and Doctors David and Beth Hawse you all are the first people to return to this series of talks. You're interview number 30. And so I'm thrilled to have you here. You guys both work in a practice together. You've been in medicine for 20 plus years. You've seen all kinds of different ups and downs of the industry itself, but it was so helpful for me to understand what was really going on the medical side of COVID, but also an exercise in crisis communications, because the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, continues to get national praise. You see him in the Twitter following, Twitter spheres. Other people are realizing he's doing some amazing things. So I'm going to follow along with folks that are here asking questions on the side. Like I think we got Jeremy Nathan that just popped on. Yes, I did change my background, Nathan. Good point. I'm trying new things, trying to become better connected to the internet and the Wi-Fi. And in my house, it's not consistent. But what is consistent,
you do a different room.
So I do it in a different room. But what is consistent is how smart Beth is. David, not so much, but certainly Beth. So what's changed in a week since we last talked? What do we need to know about now? And we'll try to pack through as much of this as possible so that those in Kentucky and nationwide can watch the governor. And oh, by the way, I'm going to pull up his feed when we get to that point here at the top of the hour. So what's new? What's changed? What do we got to know?
So I think the big thing that's changed for me this week, I don't know if our life has really changed. We're going to work in the morning, seeing well babies in the morning, in the afternoon, doing a lot of telemedicine. That's really not changed since last we spoke, and then dealing with our 3 teenagers in the house.
Right.
That's not really changed. What has changed medically, I think, is maybe my realization of how the doctor word would be sensitive, how sensitive the testing is for COVID.
That is a really big word. Say it slower.
Sensitive. So when the test for COVID needs to be both sensitive and specific. So sensitive, it means what percentage of people with COVID get a positive test. And specific means that it only tests for COVID. It's not like picking up flu. It's what percent true that are COVID positive truly only have COVID. Right. So the specificity of the test is pretty good, up in the 90%, but the sensitivity is really horrible. Like the sensitivity of one of the tests here in Kentucky that they've sort of had to jerry rig because the whole WHO testing, the CDC, it's really 60%. So quite honestly, like you or I could probably go, yeah, we've all been quarantined now for 3 weeks and you have a new onset of fever, cough, body ache, 60. Yeah. I mean, we're going to guess, right? That's only a little better than a flip of a coin that you have COVID. For example, one of my friends who works in the adult world knows that there's a patient right now in Lexington who's had 4 negative tests, intubated in the ICU with CT scan that is totally consistent with COVID.
Wow. So let me make sure I understand that correctly. So somebody tested negative 4 times, and yet they still ended up having the symptoms of COVID, and according to their scan shows everything.
Right.
So the reason this is important is, I think as we see New York kind of maybe flatten out a little bit, I will say in February, so I'll say this. In February, Beth and I took all of our money in our 401ks and put it into cash or stable value funds, because from a doctor's standpoint, we were seeing what was happening in China, number one. Number two, when the data came out that maybe 20% of people need to be admitted to the hospital, we realized that the way China had solved this, or at least tempered it, was, locking down 20, 40, 50-story apartment buildings. You can't leave, right?
Yeah.
And we were very concerned that in the United States that Americans would not take well to that type of restriction. Suggestion.
Order. Yeah.
And that our government would not be functional enough to actually do it. I have been, frankly, pleasantly surprised the level that people have actually taken to this. And you can see that in the numbers in places like Kentucky. You can see it in the numbers in Austin. I've been tracking those numbers and sending them to you intermittently. And so, New York may be at the peak. Cuomo today said they may be at the peak of their hospitalizations. And so I think as people start getting some hope that maybe we can relax all of this and let people start coming out, you have to realize that testing is a critical portion of that. Good testing is a critical portion, and extensive testing is a critical portion. Because unless we can test, and unless we can test everybody, we can't go back to where they were trying to test and track. Now the problem is and so unless we get better testing, it's really difficult to do that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of testing, so Jeremy Nathan is listening in, and you can read his question, I think, on the screen. First of all, thank you. He wants to thank you all for doing that. But how many different kinds of COVID tests are there out there? What are the differences? And do all the tests show if you've previously had it?
So the first thing is none of the tests show if you've previously had it. Right now, that's a separate question. So there's what we call an antigen. So antigens are like things that you get infected with, right? So viruses, they're technically parts of viruses that your body develops immune responses to.
They're foreign things that your body responds to. That's the
antibodies are the proteins that your body generates to fight off the antigen. And so what happens is that right now we're doing antigen type testing. So we're testing for DNA and we're testing for RNA and various other ways to test for COVID if you actually have it. To my knowledge, there is not good antibody testing out there right now. And that's a problem because, so think about it, like polio is something that you get vaccinated to. We can test the antibodies once you get vaccinated to. You get it once, you never get it again. Okay. Right. Rhinovirus is a group of viruses that, there's so many of them that you don't really get enough immunity so that's the common cold.
Right.
So that's why you can get a common cold 3, 4, 5 in kids, as many as 14 separate viral illnesses in a 12-month period. So the issue is not only the issue is you don't get really good neutralizing antibodies to it. So the problem, and you've seen some of this in Japan, is it's a muddled picture out there between some people have had COVID and then they test them again a month later and it looks like they have it again.
Yeah.
And so the question is, did they really have it the first time, but the test was falsely positive? Do they really have it this time, or is the test positive? Or are people not really generating antibody responses to the first infection with it, and can you get reinfected?
Right.
I hope that's not the case, because I pray that's not the case, because that makes it a much bigger problem, not only from a reinfection standpoint, but also developing an immune response.
Well, so let's stay on that subject of hard to understand. This question comes in from Lucy Frost. She's saying that she's hearing about deaths from COVID or either overreported and due to comorbidities. I guess that means they had something else that was hurting them.
Right.
Beth, what is your thoughts on this? Is this something that's overreported, underreported? What are you hearing?
Probably more underreported. So just having a comorbidity doesn't mean you didn't die of COVID. For example, if I have horrible kidney function to start with and I'm on dialysis and I have a heart attack And because my heart is working poorly, it does not send blood to my kidney and it makes my kidneys fail worse. It doesn't mean I didn't die of a heart attack. Does that make sense? The heart attack was the precipitating factor. I had renal failure on top of it. So these people that have had heart problems, kidney problems, lung problems, and they've had COVID and then they've succumbed, they're dying
that
of
means
COVID.
die.
Yeah. But there are, on those death certificates, there isn't one cause of death. I mean, you can list multiple, so this would be multiple. I do think they're underreported, and I only say that because of there's something called Med Twitter. I don't know if you've ever looked at hashtag Med Twitter, but it is Dr. Twitter, and so people are sharing all sorts of just what they're seeing in their hospital or what they're seeing in their work, kind of like we're doing with you guys today, but doctor to doctor, and nurse to nurse. And a lot of for the pathologists who are doing autopsies on these people are saying their lungs look like COVID. They were never tested, but I'm seeing their lungs look like COVID. And I do not have a test. We're not going to, not that you're wasting a test on somebody who's already died, but when you have a limited number, you're going to save them to try to save the living, right? Yeah. And they say they're suspicious. There are many more deaths from COVID than what we think.
But on the other side of that equation, I think there's also a lot of people that are not diagnosed. I mean, like we see kids over telemedicine who I think have did we lose you?
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just working up some stuff in the background to get ready for the to come up. You guys keep going.
We see kids that clearly, I think, have COVID. They have had a sibling that has lost their sense of taste and smell. They have fever, cough, sore throat, and we see them over telemedicine. They're not having respiratory distress. They're sitting there talking to you, and we don't send those people even to the ER to be tested, because whether they're positive or negative doesn't really matter, because there's not anything that you can do about it. So, the whole issue
and a negative test doesn't mean you're okay.
That's correct. And so the whole issue is we both have a numerator problem, which is identifying the people who actually have it, or the people that actually are dying from it. And we also have a denominator problem, looking at the number of people that actually have it. But what I will tell you is that I have friends that we trained in Gainesville, Florida. We have friends all across the Southeast. I have friends in Lexington who practice a wide different variety of medicine. And, a friend of mine texted me this afternoon that, he said he's out walking around the neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in Lexington today. And he runs into people who are like, oh, this is overblown. This is not a big deal. And the doctors that I know none of them think that this is getting blown out of proportion.
No, it's a horrible disease. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
And scary.
It's a horrible, scary
and will continue to be for a while.
Oh, there's the 5 o'clock
lights.
There's the
5 o'clock lights. The governor must be on. Here, I'll fix them.
Yep. No, I'm on the other screen pulling it up. So Beth, while we turn off lights and get ready for the governor of Kentucky to come up with this very famous briefing he's doing now,
there you go.
Talk about the changes in attitude that you've seen in people over 7 days that may or may not have believed in it before.
Yeah, I specifically will tell you, and I won't name names, but someone who
name names.
No, it doesn't matter. You don't even know this person, but it just in my own Facebook, people that I know from high school or elementary school who have said, "Oh, this is something that is because of the election," or, "Oh no, I don't believe this." I've had some friends here in town that have had it that maybe didn't believe it, and now they've seen people have it, or they have had it, or they've had family members that have had it, and they believe.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to happen to people. I want people to take it seriously. I mean, I say as a scientist, I mean, I'm not a basic scientist, but science isn't faith in something or someone. We talked about this last time. Science is the curiosity to ask the question and to go into the question without a preconceived notion of what the outcome's going to be, and just looking for facts. And so the fact of this is, for a certain percentage of the population, it's devastating.
Yes.
And we don't know why.
There have been a couple of studies that have come out, at least one study that I'm aware of that's come out that, so COVID is a retrovirus, so it's similar. HIV. So the way HIV works is HIV is an RNA virus that injects RNA into a cell, and then that is and then makes DNA from the RNA. So it uses a reverse transcriptase. Don't worry about that.
Whoa, you just blew my mind with that.
Don't worry about it. It won't be on the test.
Okay.
But coronavirus works in a similar way. It really works from an RNA base and then goes to DNA in order to make other viral particles. There are some retrovirals, which are the class of antivirals that you use on HIV patients, who there's some preliminary studies that may be helping people in these studies, not only from China, but in Europe and some in the United States. So there is some hope out there as far as developing some or using some retrovirals. It's interesting to me. You've seen a lot of the president talking about chloroquine or hydrochloroquine and azithromycin. Intuitively, I don't even understand how that would potentially work, because those are both, it's an antiparasitic and antibacterial, and it's just like giving antibiotics for a cold. I don't even understand how it works.
Understand the hydrochloroquine,
yes.
which is Plaquenil. So Plaquenil, which you give to people with lupus, which you give to people with psoriatic arthritis, which I have. So so there's something called, and this will not be on the test. Okay, there's something called cytokines, which are inflammatory mediators. It's what gives you fever and ache and all that other stuff when you get sick. One is called IL-6, interleukin 6. Anyway, it decreases that. So you're using not the main mechanism of action of the Plaquenil, which is the brand name for that.
All right, so I want to pull you back just a little bit. So the governor of Kentucky's on right now. Let me see if I can get his get the sound to come on in there. Let's see.
So yesterday he did a sign language lesson at the beginning of his briefing. So I guess we missed that this morning.
I think they just did it.
Did they do it?
Yeah.
Let's see. I don't know if I can pull the sound up from his briefing. I'll work on that for our next time together. But generally, just describe, if you will. We'll end here in the next 2 minutes, so that we can continue to talk about or listen to the governor for those that do want to listen to him.
So there was one thing you and I talked about last week about specific things people can do in their daily lives to make themselves safer. And I think that's something, or specific things that Beth and I have done that I think are important for people to at least think about. And we can talk about that if you want to, or we can talk about what you want to talk about.
10 steps right here.
We have a question from Lucy. It's another good one, Beth, if you want to take that.
Older people, yes, but it can be anyone. I know in Detroit, they lost an ER resident this week. I mean, those are people that are 30, not even.
Yeah.
They've lost several residents in New York City. So when you see resident physicians dying, those people, for the most part, are less than 30. Some of them are early 30s, and usually pretty healthy because they're staying up all night every fourth night.
And also, smoking clearly makes this work. People who are smokers don't tolerate this very well, or vapors. And that's another thing that you can personally do that can make a big difference.
Eric's point is so big, it fills up the screen. So we're only going to keep it there for a second, but he's basically talking about the two different camps that people are falling into.
Well, I'm camp one, because you can't make money and you can't graduate from high school if you're not here.
Yep.
If you're dead. So, our small business is losing money. We own our own practice. I have a high school junior who was supposed to be in New York this week on this huge art history trip, going to all these different museums. He was, for his 16th birthday, supposed to go to Paris in June. He chose that rather than, buying a car was his other option. So, everybody has those things. And yes, it's sad, but it's not as sad as losing a family member.
I think, and we said this last week, The thing is, yes, you can open things up and let everyone go back out.
Yeah.
And the result of that is the rate of rise will be higher. The death rate is much higher from it because the hospitals get overwhelmed. And as opposed to me being a pediatrician, I'm in there intubating 80-year-old adults.
You
and
do not
so
want me treating you. I have not done it since 1997.
we can make it through this. And
I would still rather have you, Beth, with no training in 20 years than David on any given day. I'll just say that right now.
But if if we could make it through this in 6 weeks by everyone going out and getting it, and there are 300 million people in the United States, and about 30 million of them to 35 million of them would die.
That there's got to be,
and that's like Russia and Germany in 1938.
I was going to say there's got to be a military equivalent of this, right? Like you just lose a bunch of people and get it over with, or the whole thing lasts longer and you lose fewer people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically our choices, neither one of which are great, but it's two bad choices. So,
but I don't think you can open up everything up and not have doctors making decisions that this person is either too old to be admitted to the hospital, too sick to be admitted to the hospital. And that's what's happening in Italy. That's what's happened in Spain. And it hasn't happened. I think it's happened some in New York, but I don't think to the levels that we've been concerned about. But ultimately, the answer to this is, if you're over 70, you go home, live or die.
In Italy, it was 40.
Yeah.
Which for those of us over 40 doesn't seem that old. But if you have a senior in high school, you're usually right around there. And so it gets, And I think part of it is David and I said this, I think the whole reason they make you take gross anatomy in medical school is I know what a dead person looks like. That is not a foreign concept to me. It is not, it is very concrete in my mind, and it is horrible. It's horrible when it happens to people. It's going to happen to us all for one reason or another, but when it happens prematurely, it's absolutely horrible. And, anything that you or I can do to prevent that. And usually it's people that have my job that are able to prevent it. But now it's really everybody, no matter what your job. If you stay home, you are preventing people from dying.
That's right.
Yeah. You need to help the medical professionals do their jobs. We need your help.
Well, and that probably is the perfect note to end on, which is, and I love all those pictures that are flying around of medical staff that said, we went to work, so we just would like you to stay at home.
Yes.
Even the Larry David public service announcement. I don't know if you saw it.
Yes, I saw it.
Yes.
It was pretty fabulous. Just stay at home, guilt-free. Watch everything on Netflix. In fact, there was a person in Iowa I heard went all the way to the end of Netflix, then just turned around and watched it all in foreign films. So,
yes, learn another language. Watch it in another language.
Exactly. Let's see.
Learn to play the banjo.
There you go.
Before we go, Melvin's got a question in terms of best guess as to when we might be safely through this.
I keep saying Father's Day, but that's all based on testing. If we knew it's so, like if you told me tomorrow we were going to have unlimited testing and we could figure out who it was,
and convalescent testing,
then I think it wouldn't take that long. But without testing, it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid for what's going to happen in the fall if we don't have better testing.
Okay. Well, on that note, I like ending these in the same way, which is to remind us that it's those people on the front lines and the sick, that you all are part of that industry of healthcare givers. That's our first thoughts. Second thoughts, of course, are all those people that have suddenly now found themselves out of work. And then thirdly, of course, you have the people that are still working on their business, that are trying to figure out how to keep it going, how to keep it together, especially if they're a startup or a small business, and especially as they try to fight through the bureaucracy and get to these loans. In fact, on Monday, I plan on having a show about how it is that people are actually getting some of this money or not getting some.
Well, you can call David about that one too.
Yeah, because we haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah. I haven't talked to a whole lot of people yet who have, so that'll be part of my special or my interview on Monday. But I want to thank you both. Thank you. Both chimed in. We had pretty good turnout this afternoon on a Friday or a Saturday afternoon. Those that are interested, check out the governor of Kentucky. He's doing a pretty good job. They call him the Mr. Rogers now of explaining to people how things work. So thanks a lot, you two. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. See y'all later.